Welcome back to Gold Derby. I'm Christopher Rosen, and I'm joined by who else but Joyce to talk about.
I'm a mononym now.
just like Cher, Joyce. Who else but Cher?
Who else but Cher?
Who else but Joyce to talk to us about the 1998 Oscars? Joyce, we love this one, the Titanic Oscars.
It was Titanic, like lowercase t.
The biggest Oscars of all time. 57 million viewers watched this Oscars, a 3-hour and 47-minute show. Somehow, we've been doing these Oscars playbacks for weeks. We had not hit a show longer than this year's Oscars, but we did it with Titanic.
But it's only by like 7 minutes, like barely
longer, and much better again. One
and also a lot packed with 24 categories and 5 performances.
24 categories, 5 performances, a Oscars family photo because it was the 70th anniversary of the Academy Awards, an opening introduction, which they don't really do anymore, from the president of the Academy.
Honorary Oscar for Stanley Donen. So
honorary Oscar for Stanley Donen, presented by Martin Scorsese. Just an epic show to celebrate the king of the world, James Cameron, and Titanic. I love this, Joyce. What were your top line thoughts about this? We did the who else but Cher. I wrote down a couple other things in the introductions, which they really have to bring back. That is another.
I don't know if we've talked about this yet in the previous ones, but Oscar ceremonies, like on ABC, the broadcast used to start with the arrivals, like a montage of the arrivals, and then you just have like a voiceover person pointing out stars to you. But with it's like they use like thesaurus. Well, I guess thesaurus.com didn't exist then, but they consulted a thesaurus for some adjectives to describe these actors.
So this one was great. Yeah. It's on the Academy's YouTube page. You can actually go watch this. So we both, and actually the whole ceremony I think is online as well. Joyce.
There's someone uploaded the whole ceremony, so you could search for that.
Search through it. Who else but Cher was one great one. The beautiful newlywed Sharon Stone, I took note of that. Yes. That was a good one. This twofer I really enjoyed, Joyce. Helena Bonham Carter, lovely Best Actress nominee. Long pause. Drew Barrymore. Period. Nothing else. Couldn't even come up with an adjective or applauded for Drew Barrymore.
They surprised them with the shot of Drew Barrymore, probably. So they were not prepared.
Drew Barrymore.
Still better than last week when we did the previous year ceremony when they mistakenly said Chris O'Donnell was Batman.
Yes. And then this one, you texted me last night, and I had actually already wrote it down. It's a hilarious one. Joyful Oscar acceptor, Cuba Gooding.
Who else?
Just remarkable. So Billy hosted again, Joyce. You were saying this right before we started recording. Billy Crystal seemingly had no interest in coming back for what was his, I believe, 6th appearance as host, right?
Yeah, like that's all the story, that Gil Cate's back to produce again, and he wanted Billy to come back, and Billy, after hosting the previous year, he was like, I'm done, and they had to convince him to come back.
And so a lot of the opening is Billy being convinced to come back, basically, and his song and dance is, I would say, or his, not the song and dance, the montage of him in the movies is a tough beat, I would say, looking at it now, including him as Sammy Davis Jr., which I know he trotted out again at the 2012 Oscars to much consternation online. I feel like it played well in the room because they're laughing, but I'm like, oh boy, when you watch it again, it's like Billy as Sammy Davis in Titanic.
I mean, that bit is also online, so you could watch it yourself.
It's a rough beat.
Yeah, I always wonder, like, there is laughter, but you always have to wonder, like, is it just because they feel pressure to do it?
Maybe.
But also, it's a different time.
It's a different time, but I mean, that's a tough beat. And then he comes out, and not a big monologue. He goes right into the song, it seems.
He was over it. He's like, just cashing the paycheck.
The other thing is this ceremony, obviously one of the longest, it's got to be one of the longest ones ever, right? At 3 hours and 47 minutes. Certainly it's a Titanic in length, as you said, small t. It felt like from the jump they were just like, we're out of time and like burning through things. So like Billy comes out, he doesn't really do jokes, and then does his song and dance routine of the Best Picture nominees. Titanic is to the theme from Gilligan's Island, pretty classic one. He does As Good as It Gets to Let's Call the Whole Thing Off, and recycles a joke about James L. Brooks not being nominated for when Barbra Streisand wasn't nominated for Best Director. Like, did this film direct itself, basically? He does.
Well, also James L. Brooks wasn't nominated for director for broadcast news either.
Correct. Which I guess we could talk about that when we get through this, but obviously Terms of Endearment was such a juggernaut. He won 3 Oscars for that. And then Broadcast News is a great movie. I'd argue like maybe should have won that year. I was looking actually that year when we were researching this, and I was like, oh man, Broadcast News is a great movie, not nominated. And then this, As Good as It Gets, I would say not a great movie, and he was not nominated. So I'm not surprised he wasn't nominated, but really the Academy did not really warm to James L. Brooks after Terms of Endearment, I guess.
No.
Director.
No.
He does Matt and Ben, You Are the One, to Night and Day for Good Will Hunting. A lot of the jokes here are about how Matt Damon and Ben Affleck are children.
Yeah, and they were 25 and 27.
So they look pretty young, but they're not that young. I don't know. I was just like...
No. And also it's funny to think of like, because Ben is still the youngest original screenplay winner at 25. And like, I don't know, maybe because I was 12 then. So like he did look older to me, but now watching it, I'm like, that was a 25-year-old and he looks like he's in his 30s.
Yeah, it's pretty, they were pretty young. We'll talk about this. This is a great, I maybe buried the lead here as we're doing our intro, but 1997, just an all-time year.
A Titanic year.
Titanic year. And then he did the Full Monty was Hello Dolly. So those are the 5 Best Picture nominees: Titanic, As Good as It Gets, Good Will Hunting, and LA Confidential, and the Full Monty. LA Confidential was A Fascinating Rhythm by George Gershwin, was Billy's song and dance there. He plays to Jack. I believe he makes a reference to Jack hitting the guy's car with a golf club. That was like still a runner in the 90s, right? Remember when Jack Nicholson got into a altercation in a traffic stop?
A Clippers and Lakers joke.
Right. Obviously. He has it's the Ellen DeGeneres selfie before selfies. He has Helen Hunt use a Kodak disposable camera to take a photo of him and Jack. It's just so perfect.
They should have just done a Polaroid.
No, we weren't using Polaroids. We were using those cameras in the 90s.
I know, but like 90s. You would have gotten the picture right away. It's like the selfie. You got it right away.
Oh man. So yeah, Joyce. So let's talk, Joyce, first about 97 in film, as we love. That's our favorite Wikipedia page. I've looked at that Wikipedia page so many times. It's just the greatest year. I would say I was. Let's see. So 1997. I guess I was a sophomore in college, I believe. Just the greatest time. I saw every one of these movies in the movie theater, Joyce. Every single one. Lincoln Square.
I saw some of them in the theater, but most of them I saw on pay-per-view, my free pay-per-view.
Right. You had the pirated pay-per-view box. I think the statute of limitations on that is probably over by now, but I don't even remember when we got rid of that cable box, but at some point, like we got rid of it. And probably when I was in college, my parents got rid of it. I don't remember. I saw all of these, like literally every single one of these. I went to the movies probably every week. We saw a ton of these in college over the summer. The top grossing movie of the year, obviously, was Titanic, the biggest movie of all time until Avatar. I saw that in Glen Cove, Joyce. It opened on, I think, December. I believe when did it open?
December 19th, 1997.
So I went with one of my best friends. We were on winter break from college, and everywhere was sold out. And so we drove around looking to see it. And
wait, did you try to go to Roosevelt Field?
Yes, all over Long Island went. Ended up being a Glen Cove showing at like 9:00. It was us and a bunch of blue hairs, and we were pretty close, like maybe second row because it was close to sold out. And we watched the whole thing. Still don't understand how it got away with a PG-13 because there's so much nudity in it, frankly, that it should be probably rated R. But James Cameron was king of the world, I guess. In the 90s, he could do whatever he wanted. We watched it, and I remember driving home at like midnight because it's a 3-hour movie, and us talking about how much we love the cinematography. We're like, oh man, what great cinematography, huh? That was
Wait,
really
had
cool.
You seen like LA Confidential at this point?
So LA Confidential, we saw opening weekend in Lincoln Square because we were still in school and it wasn't on break. And Good Will Hunting, we saw opening weekend in Lincoln Square as well. And I remember that one, we had to get tickets, like advance buy tickets, and we were again really close at Lincoln Square. Like it was like we were like second row of that, which is a little too close. But yeah, no.
Wow,
this is a
you
great
were
year.
you like Sopranos that like years before.
Yes, we were waiting. We did the Lincoln Square limited opening because Good Will Hunting didn't open, I don't think, nationally.
I did not, unfortunately, I did not see Go Will Hunting in the theaters. I saw that on pay-per-view, but I saw Titanic in the theater, obviously, with my friends, like over Christmas break.
How many times did
And
you see it?
in the theater, I saw it twice. So I saw that like over Christmas. And then I saw it again in April '98. So after the Oscars,
Right.
because my cousins were visiting from Puerto Rico and they had not seen it yet. So then we all went to see
Gotta
it.
go.
And we were still like, we weren't in the first row, but like pretty close to the first row. It was still packed, the theater. Like people just kept seeing this movie over and over again.
I mean, it's like no one needs us to say this, but wow, Titanic, a phenomenon. It was nominated for how many Oscars? There's 14 Oscars.
14, and
111.
it won 11. So it tied Ben-Hur, and then later would be tied by Lord of the Rings, Return of the King, which went 11 for 11.
Yeah.
So like the big story, or the storyline for Titanic going in was like everyone expected it to win. It was just like, how many will it win? Can it beat Ben-Hur? And it really hinged on supporting actress.
Right.
Because it wasn't gonna, I mean, Kate was not gonna win Best Actress, Kate Winslet, and it was gonna lose makeup to Men in Black. So it was up to Gloria Stewart.
And there was like, Gloria, I think she was the oldest nominee ever at that time.
Yes. Yeah. She dethroned Jessica Tandy.
And this Oscar ceremony, again, we talk about it when we talk about this year, how they just seemingly like, how can we get as far away from what people like about the Oscars as possible? And while this year, I think, is just full excess because of Titanic and the length of the show, and Billy seems totally disinterested in being there, they are celebrating Hollywood in a way that the current Oscars, it's like foreign to, I think, this current Oscars.
Well, also this, in that we covered the previous ceremony last week, so we went in order this time.
Yes.
And the films of '96, that year was the year of Independence Day.
Yes.
And everyone, like Hollywood, was pressed about that. But now it's like Titanic saved us, even though everyone thought it was going to be a huge flop because it went over budget so long. But it saved them basically. And now it's like big studio films back at the Oscars, and it was going to win. So it was, excess, and they were, I don't know, it was like super celebratory of Titanic, but it was just like, it was the big dog. And we knew it was going to win, but yes, they're celebrating the Oscar history, their industry, with the family photo album of all these past acting winners, a lot of them who are no longer with us. That segment is also online. Very sad to watch some of them now. They did it again for the 75th Oscars, and missing more people now too.
Yeah. There's one part also, like even there's a part where Billy and Fay Ray introduce Matt and Ben, I believe, that is also like it's just a little sad because she's clearly very elderly at that point, I would say.
And she wasn't on stage, so he had to go to her seat in the aisle to talk to her. So.
Yeah, and she couldn't like see the screen, and like it reminded me a little of Eliza Minnelli, honestly, like from this past year's Oscars, where it's like, whether or not they're whatever aspect of her health you want to talk about. And obviously this week, I think one of Liza Minnelli's friends was like, actually, she wanted like a director's chair and was kind of thrown off by a last minute switch to a wheelchair at this year's Oscars. And that is why she was a little discombobulated. It's like, you can understand that the Fay Ray thing feels like she was kind of ambushed by Billy, even though maybe it was planned or whatever. And she's kind of like a little discombobulated. And it's not necessarily because she's old, but also just because she's probably like, what is going on right now? And it's like,
she probably was not ready to riff. Like maybe she was just ready to introduce Matt and Ben.
So this is like the Matt and Ben Oscars. They're right in the front row. Kate Winslet and Gloria Stewart next to each other. Jack just being the most Jack in the front row. Full Jack.
That's a seat, like center.
Just the full Jack experience. I really enjoyed this Oscars. Honestly, when we were watching it. Like everything, like it's just,
I like watching it. So you watched the whole thing live back then?
Yes, this was
it was another Monday ceremony.
It was a Monday ceremony. This is definitely one I watched live because I had seen all these movies and we had rooting. Like, I mean, I have come around. I never was not a fan of Titanic. I think always thought it was good, but it always felt like Titanic is like an Oscar movie, and I was way more into LA Confidential, and still am, and like Good Will Hunting and Boogie Nights and Jackie Brown, which we'll talk about. All these different movies are like some of my favorite movies literally of all time. All came out in the same year. And so Titanic was like, ugh, I can't believe it's gonna win. And I was like, maybe LA Confidential could win. I knew it was gonna like take screenplay because like the Titanic screenplay was like notably not a real
Yeah,
contender.
it's still the most recent Best Picture winner with no screenplay nomination.
And it was like, oh, LA Confidential could really, maybe that wins, and maybe there's backlash against Titanic for being so big and blah blah blah. But obviously, that's not what happened.
Yeah, I was not a big Titanic super fan either. Like I liked it fine. You know, a lot of my friends were in love with Leo,
right.
and I was like, did none of you guys watch Growing Pains? Like, he's been around. Like
Leo,
Romeo and Juliet the year before.
Romeo and Juliet for sure. We'll talk about this when we go through the categories. I think Leo's one of the more egregious snubs, I would argue. I think he should have been nominated. He's so good in Titanic.
He is, yeah.
Great.
And then he didn't even go, which was like a huge deal back then too, if you recall.
And I love that he didn't go.
Same.
F it. It's like just like that's Leo, man. He's gonna do his own thing, and it's great. Yeah. I'm waiting on that. No, it was like so. Like I was definitely watching all of this. We had a huge rooting interest. These are again like amazing movies. Like so, the top grossing movies of the year. It's funny. Like this is like we said. Like last year when we did this last week was the Independence Day. Jerry Maguire was the only studio movie. Everything else was like movies that no one saw basically, or saw like in a much smaller number than like previous years in studio movies. This year you have Titanic, the biggest movie of all time. As Good as It Gets was a monster hit. I think it made like 250 million worldwide or something. Let me look.
Yeah, it's
314 million.
Yeah, for a rom-com.
For a rom-com that's frankly not very good. I would say hasn't aged incredibly well, or at least is not in the culture. You have The Full Monty was another like huge surprise hit when like this was like a stealth like indie kind of thing released by Fox. Made $257 million worldwide, just huge. So you have those are 3 of the 5 Best Picture nominees. And then Good Will Hunting was an actual hit, even though it was a Miramax movie in indie. It made like, I think like 138 million in North America or something. I'll look at it. I should have wrote this down just because I was watching it last night and just like, man, movie's great.
It was on TV like recently. I watch that whenever it's on TV. This is just one of those movies I'm not going to say no to.
It's so good. It's still so good. Yeah, it made like 240 million worldwide. So Good Will Hunting was like a hit. As Good as It Gets was it. The only one that really kind of flopped was LA Confidential. And as we read in Inside Oscar 2, which I know we both were looking at, definitely not a win for the Warner Brothers marketing team at that time. So I think the Warner Brothers marketing
annoyed.
team.
I mean, it wasn't a complete flop. Like it still made money. But
it wasn't a complete flop. And I remember, again, it was like a notable release because, again, like we were like excited to see it. It was obviously like a bunch of unknowns in Russell Crowe and Guy Pearce, which is funny. Kevin Spacey off like Usual Suspects and like in his like ascendancy was like we said, like big on SNL in 97 doing his like Christopher Walken impressions. As we were talking about last year's Oscars or the 97 Oscars. So it was like notable, but it just didn't do as well as I guess people maybe thought, though I don't know how well it could have done. I mean, like, frankly, so.
Yeah. And they blamed the marketing for it, and they kind of adjusted it after the nominations, and they focused it more on like Kim Basinger. But I don't really recall like the promo and the lead up to LA Confidential. So
I don't either. I mean, it was like promoted, like to me, it was promoted like Chinatown, like, and it is like a close approximation of Chinatown, I guess, right? Like it's like that same style. Yeah, made 126 million worldwide. It says on Wikipedia, though I can't really imagine that.
Which it's still a good, like, films today would kill for that.
Right. Domestically, it made 64 million. Opened in September and obviously played for a long time. Just a great year for movies. So you watch most of these on pay-per-view.
Yes. The ones I saw in theaters were like the blockbusters, and like I saw Lost World, Jurassic Park.
Same.
I saw Batman and Robin opening night.
Same. June 20.
Yes.
The Bat.
Yes. I saw Tomorrow Never Dies. What else was there?
Air Force One. This is the top.
Oh my God, Air Force One. Yes. Love Air Force One.
Men in Black.
We need to bring back 90s action thrillers, like Con Air. Also saw that.
Yeah, Con Air was great. This was Face Off this year. just a lot of really good stuff. All the Star Wars movies that were released in the winter on like the re-release they did. There's a Godfather re-release. Austin Powers came out this
Yeah, the
year.
first Austin Powers, Scream 2.
Scream 2
I
was
saw that.
great.
And I Know What You Did Last Summer.
Know What You Did Last Summer was great. Saw that in the theater. One of my personal favorites was The Devil's Advocate, which I saw at Astor Place. Do you remember there was a giant movie theater at Sony, like AMC Astor Place? It was like one screen, like off of like Times Square. And that's where I saw Devil's Advocate and like Godfather re-release. And it was awesome. It was like kind of like
I saw Devil's
Ziegfeld
Advocate
size.
on pay-per-view.
Great. Just nothing but good. Like every week you could find something good. Fifth
Yeah,
Element.
like Romeo and Michelle's high school reunion. They reunited at the SAG Awards this year. Volcano, if you recall.
My best friend's wedding, which I think will come up here.
Yes.
I'll bring it up at the very least. This is another like coming into the fall. You had, those are like the big summer movies. And then coming into the fall, you had, Boogie Nights. There was a lot of buzz around just because of the trailer. And like, it was definitely something that was very much on my radar, even though I had not really done that much with Paul Thomas Anderson. I think I probably saw Hard Eight before it on tape because it came out that winter. That was his first movie. And then you had Jackie Brown coming in Christmas, which I was incredibly hyped about because obviously Pulp Fiction was such a great movie. And I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe Quentin Tarantino's coming back with like this dope movie, Jackie Brown. And I read the book because it was based on obviously the Elmore Leonard book. And I don't read, Joyce. I barely know how to put two sentences together.
I know. You ran out of words last week.
I know.
Finished a chapter on the Oscars and Inside Oscars.
No. This is just a tremendous year. Stuff that nobody remembers, but like U-Turn, Oliver Stone, that was like a big one, right? With like Sean Penn. Seeing that.
Yeah, and then there's Selena also came out. So J-Lo was there.
Yep. She even had a lot of these Oscars. Yeah.
Because the previous year Selena came out that weekend, I believe. So she was there to promote it, just like Jim Carrey was for Liar Liar.
Right. Liar Liar, another one I saw in the theater. This is like we said, like Tarantino's second movie with Jackie, or third movie, obviously Jackie Brown. Paul Thomas Anderson's second movie, Boogie Nights. You had post-breakout Danny Boyle back with A Life Less Ordinary, which is another one I saw in the theater after Trainspotting, his first movie. So these are like a lot of filmmakers that it was like, oh wow, I can't wait to see what they do next, all doing something next, which I was just.
And it was also, I mean, obviously he wasn't up and coming, but Spielberg, like he had 93 with Jurassic Park and Schindler's List, and then he was trying to like do it again basically with Lost World and Amistad, and that did not completely work out.
No. The other one I want to highlight and we'll talk about here, Wag the Dog, was another one I was super.
I really like that movie, and it's forgotten, sadly.
A great year for movies, I would say. Just unimpeachably great. There's so many good movies.
You know what else came out in 97?
What?
G.I. Jane.
Yes, I thought of that too. Bring it back to this year's Oscars. Chris Rock was really on top of it with his somewhat offensive.
He knew it was the 25th anniversary. That's
why. So yeah, Joyce. So this was the Oscars. So Titanic came in. We expected it to win. It won at the Golden Globes. It won the Producers Guild. It won Directors Guild. Just kind of like cleaned house, it seems.
Yeah, but before the Globes, it was LA Confidential all the way because it just dominated the critics, the big three, and also Critics' Choice, which is, again, as we've said, a different composition back then, and also like it's acting winners too back then. Yep. I think they gave Best Actress to Helena Bonham Carter for Wings of the Dove.
They did. And
so
Helen Hunt was a Golden Globe winner, and then Judi Dench was for Mrs. Brown. Helen Hunt, when she wins Best Actress, is like, I really thought Judi Dench was going to win, which I'm sure Judi Dench must have loved to hear. I love when people do. Can
I tell you my Helen Hunt story?
Yes, please.
So I interviewed her in 2017 because she directed an episode of Feud, Betty and Joan.
Oh, nice.
And so first of all, she calls me and she immediately apologizes. Yeah, I love when they call. And because she's on vacation with her family and she was on a boat, and she's like, it's really loud, it's really windy, just let me know if you can't hear me. And I was like, this is already amazing. And so we're talking, and so her episode was after the Oscars episode of Feud. And then I mentioned how I really liked her Helen Hunt speech because she, acknowledged other nominees, especially Judi Dench, which, not exactly what happened with Joan Crawford and Betty Davis. And she was like, yeah, like that was so crazy. Like that would never happen today. She's like, well, but then, you saw what happened in Best Picture this year. And this was like 2 months after the La La Land Moonlight fiasco. And I was like, yeah, but that was a mistake because the La La Land guys gave it to Moonlight when they realized. And she was like, yeah, but it was a mistake to let Joan accept for Anne Bancroft. Wow. I was like, you're not wrong. And, Anne Bancroft was there at this ceremony in 98 for the Oscar family album.
So good.
Yeah.
It's great. So Joyce, let's go through the categories here. I'm sure we'll talk about more as we get through it. So Titanic won Best Picture. The nominees, like we said, As Good as It Gets, The Full Monty, Good Will Hunting, LA Confidential. I still think I'd give it to Titanic, even though I like Good Will Hunting and LA Confidential way more. I think like Titanic as a complete picture probably should win. I'm not offended by this win.
No, I don't have a problem with the win either. I would probably personally vote for either LA Confidential or Good Will Hunting because those are my favorites from the year.
I watched them both this year, actually, because it's the 25th anniversary of all these movies, right, at this year. So actually going into New Year's Eve, when my wife and I hung out with our friends down the block, and we had a VCR. I got a VCR from my parents' house, and we watched Titanic on VHS.
On two VHSs.
Two VHSs. Great experience. Yeah. And then the next day I watched Boogie Nights, and the next day I watched LA Confidential, and then last night I watched Good Will Hunting. So I'm like burning through these 97 movies. And Titanic is great. They're all great, but I would say of those four, I think LA Confidential is actually the best movie, even though I enjoy Good Will Hunting more just because of
same.
LA Confidential is like unimpeachably great movie to me. It is so good. Every craft is perfect. The score is amazing. All the performances are great. Down the line, the script is so good.
I've never read the book, but I know the screenplay only adapted like 20% of the book.
Right.
But amazing screenplay as well. It's a whole labyrinth, and it works really well.
It's so good. It's so entertaining, so incredibly rewatchable, and like just every part works. There's not one bit of flab on it. Even like Good Will Hunting, like I said, you're never going to get me to say something bad about Good Will Hunting. But last night when I was watching, I was like, it does kind of fall into a little bit of a rut in the second and third act, where it's a lot of like one person talking to Matt about why he needs to like open up, right? And it's like scene after scene of like Minnie Driver being like, come let me in. And then Ben Affleck being like, take advantage of your opportunities. And then Stellan Skarsgård being like, I wish you weren't throwing away your life. And then Robin Williams, and like it's like dut. And it's like LA Confidential is just so tight. The script is awesome. And it's like, Curtis Hanson is a good director, made a lot of like fun genre pictures, but this is so incredibly above his weight, I feel like, compared to his other output. I mean, RIP to Curtis Hanson.
Wow. Rude to 8 Mile, one of my faves.
And I would say Rude to River Wild, which I love. But this
God, River Wild is so good.
This is like so much better than those movies. I think it's so good. It's like incredibly good.
I mean, this is, I was very sad when he died, because I was like, I want more Curtis Hanson movies, and he hadn't done a lot of stuff. What was his last big one, like In Her Shoes?
And Wonder Boys after?
Wonder Boys was 2000.
Yeah.
In Her Shoes was 2005.
Hard to say. I honestly think there's not one of his movies that I actually disliked. He's like a really good filmmaker.
Yeah.
Hand That Rocks the Cradle obviously was his big breakout.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, LA, like that was obviously the critics' pick. And but yeah, once Titanic blew up, there was just like no way it was winning Best Picture. And like Good Will Hunting, I've definitely have seen more over the past 25 years than LA Confidential. I can't remember the last time I watched LA Confidential.
Gotta watch it. So
like,
good.
But I watch Good Will Hunting all the time, and I feel like that Good Will Hunting is kind of a happy medium between Titanic and LA Confidential, because LA Confidential is obviously the cerebral movie, right? It's kind of like this year with Power of the Dog and Coda.
A little bit, but Good Will Hunting is like Coda.
It is. Well, yeah, it's a Miramax film, but like I think there's a difference because Titanic is it is obviously the spectacle, but it goes for like the emotion.
Right.
Whereas like LA Confidential targets your brain, and you need to pay attention. You don't really need to pay attention to Titanic, right? You could like go to the bathroom during it's like 3 hours, come back, you're fine. Oh, it didn't hit the iceberg yet. We're good. You didn't miss much here. But Go Will Hunting, yeah, like it's emotional, but it's also about, it's intellectual because it's about this genius, obviously. Right. It's about this book smart man who is not emotionally intelligent. And so I think he gives these like long speeches where you watching it, you have no idea what he's talking about. He solved these math equations, you have no idea what they mean, but it kind of intrigues you because then you're like, wow, like you want to know more about him, like that he's a genius, and you want him to succeed and work on his emotional intelligence and make these connections with people in his life and work through all his issues with Robin Williams and go chase Minnie Driver,
Yeah.
So like, but I don't think it was probably third overall, because I think it was Titanic, LA Confidential, Good Will Hunting, and then Full Monty, because that was like the surprise underdog.
I think Full Monty. So it's funny, like we're talking about the comps between this year. There's a lot of, I feel like all of these movies have like Full Monty to me feels a little like Coda as well, because it was like a sensation that definitely was of the moment. I don't know I don't dislike Full Monty. I can't say very well I've seen it in the last 25 years though.
I can't remember the last time I've seen it.
It was an absolute sensation. I think in the Inside Oscar thing, it was like people were like dancing in the aisles. It was a humongous thing. It was like a viral movie, basically, a movie that no one had heard of, that like played at Sundance, and then with a filmmaker that people weren't really familiar with, and a bunch of no-name stars, British stars who are like now actually like somewhat famous, because you have like Tom Wilkinson's in there. Robert Carlyle was like best known probably at the time for Trainspotting to American audiences at least, and it's like that was like a huge sensation. That to me feels a little like Coda, but then obviously Good Will Hunting, I think Coda is like basically Good Will Hunting at times. It does have a lot of similarities to it, I believe. Titanic to me,
like I think Coda is a lot more like heartwarming, like in what it's trying to do, and I think the writing in Good Will Hunting is a lot better than Coda's writing.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah,
it's
and like the characterizations in Good Will Hunting are a lot better as well.
The other one I would say is like I actually think who knows? Titanic was like the biggest movie of all time, and it's hard to like say like what would have happened when. But West Side Story to me is the best comp in this year's lineup to like Titanic. It feels like, because it's, again, I think a big thing with Titanic, at least from my perspective, was at the time the big narrative was like, this is gonna suck, right? It's like James Cameron spent so much money, it took so long to make. What a terrible idea. There's no way, and people had their knives out ready to like kill it when it failed. And then
it was also supposed to open in the summer.
Correct. It kept getting delayed. It was so over budget. Like that was like all like the Entertainment Weekly and Premium Magazine stories are like what a disaster this is. And then it came out and everybody's like, holy cow, it's awesome. You know what I mean? Like it was like part of the winning. It was a great movie because people were like, it exceeded expectations so much, right? I think, or what your expectations were. And it reminded me a little of West Side Story, because I think we were all like going into West Side Story like, man, I love Steven Spielberg, but like, why? What if like this is a bad idea? And then it's like you watch and you're like, holy cow, this is amazing. He really pulled it off. And so that's why I think it's a little bit like that, but obviously like different times. Like I don't think West Side
didn't make like $1 billion.
Right, but I don't even think West Side Story, if it came out and if it was like switched.
No, I don't think so either. And obviously it came out during another surge.
Right.
And it's a different time, and obviously people don't watch musicals.
Right.
Really.
But it does of the lineup, I feel like, I guess it does remind me a little of that too. I don't know. So Joyce, let's do our additional nominees here. We were talking about this a little bit earlier. Here's what I came up with. I got Boogie Nights.
Mm-hmm.
We haven't talked about Boogie Nights yet. Truly great, just like an all-time movie. One of my favorite movies of all time. Paul Thomas Anderson ripping off Robert Altman and Martin Scorsese to such an extent, but actually doing it slightly differently. Everyone in the cast is awesome.
The cast is amazing. And
it's strange to watch it now, because you're like, at the time, a lot of those people were not, it's like John C. Reilly and Don Cheadle were not well known, I don't think, at the time. You know, Don Cheadle had done probably Devil in a Blue Dress. I think I had probably seen him in before Boogie Nights, right? Was that the year before?
That was like 2 years.
95. So it was like 2 years before. He was like a nice, you know, a good character actor, but just killing it. John C. Reilly, amazing. Obviously, Mark Wahlberg is really good in it. You know,
And
just
like PTA wanted Leo, and he couldn't do it because he was doing Titanic, and he recommended Marky Mark.
so look, I don't know if it would get nominated, to be perfectly honest. If it was a 10, I think it would. I think it would be like 8th or 9th. But I would like to believe it would get nominated. Same with Jackie Brown, which I think is absolutely incredible.
I would put Jackie Brown ahead of Boogie Nights.
So Jackie Brown came out. I think people were really excited to tear down Tarantino, I think, from a critical standpoint. So when it came out and it wasn't like as rah-rah as Pulp Fiction was and more adult, I guess. I think that was like the narrative. It's like more grown up, like a little more mannered Quentin Tarantino, even though it's like fully in his wheelhouse and like does a lot of the like genre stuff that he's really good at. I just love that movie. I think it's so well made. The performances are incredible. Robert Forster got nominated for a supporting actor.
Oh my God, when he died, I watched Jackie Brown again.
He's unbelievable in it. Max Cherry is such a great character. I think you could have gotten 2 other nominations, honestly, which we could talk about here, like when we get to the categories for.
Pam Grier.
Pam Grier for sure. And I think Samuel Jackson is like, honestly, maybe never better. But yeah, so Jackie Brown and Boogie Nights I would put in. Amistad I have in. I think it would have to get in if it was 10.
Yeah.
But it was not a Steven Spielberg movie that people were really enthused by. It was fine.
Yeah, it was fine. It was just kind of, this had Oscar buzz.
Right.
Like, so maybe like this had Oscar expectations.
Yeah. So that's 8 right there. If you add those 3 to the 5, I think the other 5 would obviously get in. I don't think there's any doubt that those movies would get nominated if it was a 10. So then, 7, so that's, sorry, 6, 7, 8, so 9, 10. We have 2 more, Joyce.
I like, because I always go back to, will another like huge blockbuster get in?
Right.
Like you already have Titanic.
Right.
And then now we just listed a bunch of smaller films.
Right.
And we just like assume, just based on what we know from the past decade, would get in. But the makeup of the Academy of the past decade is also different from the one back then. I don't know, because if you look at like some of the acting nominees, like I like Mrs. Brown a lot, the movie, but I don't really see that.
Well, I actually, I kind of agree with you, and I was actually thinking Yuli's Gold would get in because people really like that movie too. It got nominated for Peter Fonda, obviously, and I think in hindsight, you could make the case that he should have won, because I'm just not convinced.
He's really good. I know. Again, like, also very sad when he died. Like he and Robert Forster died like 2 months apart.
So I actually, and Yuli's Gold again was like not as much of a juggernaut, obviously, it's like the Full Monty and like those indie movies like Good Will Hunting, where it was like an indie movie that like people really wanted to see and like played like a studio blockbuster, honestly. Yuli's Gold was not that, but it was a specialty kind of salve in the summer when it came out amid like a bunch of heavy, noisy blockbusters. People really liked that movie at the time. I don't know. I could see it maybe getting in like a kind of like a Winter's Bone style, or maybe Mrs. Brown as well on the same idea, because it came out, I think, in the summer as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, so in directing, it didn't match up with Best Picture because Adam Egoyan got into directing for This Sweet Hereafter, which is a very sad movie.
I don't know if I don't have that down as even with him as a director. I don't have that down as a possible.
Yeah, I don't think it would have gone to Best Picture either. So he would have in like a field of 10. So he would have been like the Bennett Miller Foxcatcher, like the lone directing nominee without the Best Picture nomination and an expanded lineup. But that's also another tragic film with a large number of people dying.
Yes. The other ones I wrote down were Wings of the Dove and then the Ice Storm. Ice Storm kind of like flew under the radar.
Ice Storm is a lot like Amistad.
Yes. Mm-hmm. I guess you would get the other ones from there. There's not really a lot of other. I don't like the blockbusters from this year I'm not like even after last week, we're like, let's throw Independence Day in there or whatever. I don't think you're going to get a Best Picture nomination for like My Best Friend's Wedding.
Sadly, no. And like their rom-com of choice that year was As Good as It Gets, which is male centered
and significantly worse than My Best Friend's Wedding.
Yes.
I don't know. I think you'd have Jackie Brown Boogie Nights and Amistad, and then some mix of like those smaller, like way smaller indies that we've mentioned here. I don't know if there's really anything else. Like, and last week people were like, oh, you should, like, Evita definitely would have got in and stuff. And I'm like, there's no Evita on this year's list.
I don't know. I mean, it would be cool if like In and Out had gotten in, but I don't really like for that time. I don't know if it would have, like, I could see In and Out getting in now.
Right. I give you another one. I think that actually maybe would have gotten in based on the subject matter is Wag the Dog as a Best Picture nominee. This is about Hollywood, and it's like a mix of Hollywood plus
and politics,
like, political, like Clinton politics. That was like, they were a lot of jokes. Billy has like a really, really unfortunate joke, I think, about Linda Tripp in his monologue. Like really bad. Just like he makes like a joke. Well, he makes a joke that she's recording it, which LOL. And then I think he compares her to like Michael Caine in Dressed to Kill, and they cut to Michael Caine like guffawing. It's so offensive. It just is like, no matter what you think of Linda Tripp, nobody needs to be made fun of in that fashion. Yeah. Different time.
Like, that was the humor.
Really rough. It's just like, oh, come on. Like this is not what you want. So yeah, that's the Best Picture. We could do Best Director. I feel like this is another I could really make a lot of changes in this lineup, I'll say.
Would you have nominated James L. Brooks?
So I wouldn't have nominated James L. Brooks.
So the nominees are James Cameron, obviously, King of the World, Peter Cattaneo for The Full Monty, Gus Van Sant for Good Will Hunting, Curtis Hanson for LA Confidential, and Adam Agoyan for The Sweet Hereafter.
So if I was doing it, I would unfortunately bump Peter Cattaneo and Adam Agoyan, and I would definitely throw Quentin Tarantino in here for Jackie Brown, and I would put Paul Thomas Anderson in for Boogie Nights, though I understand that neither one of them would probably get nominated.
They're too cool for, even though like still the director's branch, again, they are idiosyncratic because they nominated Adam Agoyan instead of James L. Brooks. Like I think they were not, like, PTA was still young back then. Like this is when he was with Fiona Apple. Was
he with Fiona Apple though, or was that more Magnolia era?
They were together for a while.
I guess so. I think I will say, like, he was the PTA that we saw this year's awards trail, which is like kindly Gen X dad PTA. At this point, he was like a raging narcissist PTA. I feel like he was very high wound tight, I would say. And it kind of really got tighter during Magnolia.
Yeah. And then like Quentin, I think they all, like, the Academy as a whole, they just view him more as a writer than a director.
I guess so. And I would say, like, I understand why he wasn't nominated. And like I said, I do think there was like we want to take this guy down a notch sense around that movie, because like people were just so tired of him, and he was like exhausting again at that point too. Just remember, he was like he was trying to be an actor, and like just stop it already. I think that was like the general cultural sense. But then the movie's amazing, and I think I would say like it's one of his best directed movies, because he's got, certainly I would say, of all the movies, this maybe has all of it, like a lot of his best performances. I think the work he does with the cast is unbelievable, and they're all just like firing away. The other person I wrote down was Ang Lee for Ice Storm. Again, another movie that I really think could have performed better, but just felt like it was like kind of pushed aside by the flashier like indies of like, PTA and Tarantino, and just like in general not necessarily as well warmly received, because it's a chilly movie. That's a terrible pun for Ice Storm. Do you get it? Because it's cold.
Yes, I got it. Yeah, thanks.
Ang Lee, I think, again, Peter Cattaneo, I think there is a world where he should get nominated, because making a movie that gets people literally dancing in the aisles is commendable. And I would say it's like similar to like how people were saying Sean Hayter should have gotten nominated this year, but Sean Hayter wasn't nominated this year for Best Director famously. And I think like Peter Catnea, if we were doing it again, maybe it would be a snub where you're like, oh, I can make the case for him to get nominated, but like he wasn't.
Yeah, like sort of like a Peter Farrelly as
Yeah.
well.
And then winning this, Cameron, sure, he's king of the world, Joyce.
Yeah, so I mean, did you mention Spielberg? Because he got the DGA nomination and was also nominated at the Globes. So
I didn't mention him because I don't think Amistad is one of his better movies.
No,
I can understand he
but
probably
he was like, he would just be like a name check.
He might have been the sixth, and that's actually why Adam McGoyan got in, right? Because like the passion for Spielberg wasn't necessarily there, I guess, to put him in the lineup. Everybody else, I'm like, Gus Van Sant, I think does a great job of Good Will Hunting. It's, you know, really good, solidly directed movie. And I love, again, we talked about Curtis Hanson just firing away for LA Confidential. Really a remarkable movie. This speech, Titanic, James Cameron gives famously, I'm king of the world at the end. Just so uncomfortable. And then he wins for Best Picture with obviously John Landau, and they go up, and John Landau like rattles off like 300 names in a row, like the Micro Machines guy. And then
James Cameron is like, he's watched Shine too many times,
which is kind of funny. And then he comes up, and like, this is by this point of the show, they're all mentioning Gil Cates and how he's like having a coronary in the control room because the show is going so long. And then
I was just wondering like if people at home knew who Gil Cates was. This guy getting name dropped. I mean,
clearly they like, I'm trying to think, like, I guess you knew him as like, I could picture him, like I know what he looks like. So I guess he was like enough out there at the time that it's like, oh, the Oscars producer is famous enough to be mentioned. But yeah, they're all mentioning him. And then James Cameron's like, does this whole long-winded speech, and then it's like, and now I'd like to do a moment of silence for the 1,200 people who lost their lives, the men, women, and children of the Titanic. And he's just standing there, and the camera cuts behind him, and everybody's just like, okay.
I mean, I totally respect what he did. Yeah. Very moving. It went on a little bit longer than I remember watching it live, and I was like, I think you should like end it now, because
it feels like a long beat. And then you just wrap it up. And it's just strange to me because the movie, like, I mean, yes, I understand it's about the tragedy and stuff. And I don't know, maybe I'm too cynical, but I'm like, you spent the whole night like celebrate, like, to do it right at the end just feels like, oh, by the way, we should, I guess, like acknowledge that this is a movie about a terrible tragedy and not just some like fun blockbuster with Leo.
Yeah. And I guess like he could have also done it in his directing speech, right? But then he's like, I know I'm going to win Best Picture, so I'm going to save this.
And I'm king of the world. So Joyce, in the research here, we have not another Oscars that was, you know, a lot of Harvey Weinstein, and especially for Good Will Hunting, and he gets referenced numerous times. So as it turns, after Harvey Weinstein was, you know, disgraced and convicted and all these things, there was a new interview with James Cameron about Titanic, and he talks about how he got into a fight with Harvey Weinstein at this Oscars. So presumably, based on what he says here, after he wins Best Director, before he wins Best Picture, I guess Harvey Weinstein comes up to him and is like trying to like glad hand him or whatever. And here's what James Cameron says: I remember almost getting in a fight with Harvey Weinstein and hitting him with my Oscar. Then this is a quote: it was happening on the main floor at the theater. The music had started to play to get back in our seats. The people around us were saying, not here, not here. Like it was okay to fight in the parking lot, like, you know, but not okay when the music was playing and they were about to go live. And then I guess James Cameron in the Vanity Fair interview says, it's a kind of a long story, but it had to do with Guillermo del Toro and how badly he was dealt with by Miramax on Mimic, which was a movie that del Toro directed when he was like more of a genre, kind of known for his genre movies, I guess. James Cameron says, Harvey came up glad handing me, talking about how great they were for the artist. And I just read him chapter and verse about how great I thought he was for the artist based on my friend's experience. And that led to an altercation.
We could have had a slap back then.
We could have. I mean, if James Cameron punched Harvey Weinstein with his freaking Oscar, that would have left a mark. I think more so than Will Smith slapping Chris Rock in the face.
So in like Inside Oscar, there is a quote from Harvey, who is like, he obviously knew like Good Will Hunting was an underdog, but like that, like it was saying like how that just didn't stop him from being like, we still have a chance. Like he was still, I guess, like gaslighting himself and everyone else.
For sure.
You're thinking like there's still a chance that like we could beat Titanic.
It's funny watching like this we watched the we watched the Independence Day Oscars. So it was an English Patient, which Miramax released. Harvey was an EP on, not an Oscar winner, obviously. And but the movie won, and like kind of he came in at the last minute and saved it. And he's definitely a factor of that ceremony. And then this one way more. He's in the front row with like Ben and Matt, and Robin Williams gives him a shout out. And then next year after this, we have obviously Shakespeare in Love, which is like the Miramax ascendancy. So it's like, it is interesting to watch this just play out over Oscars. But yeah, good for James Cameron to, give Harvey Weinstein the riot act. I'm disappointed that story had not been told for so long until like, obviously like this is from 2017. So
that's when everyone felt it was okay. It was like,
yeah, everybody took out their,
they got the green light. We can tell all our Harvey stories now.
So let's see what else here. Hang on, I lost my pager. So that was directing. Cameron wins, right? If you were doing this again.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with like any of Titanic's wins, really. It's like
we'll get to one later when we go through like rapid fire. I could come up with like one or two or two. Not cinematography though, Joyce, because as you know, when I saw it, I was like,
there was the cinematography. Yeah,
what great cinematography. Best actor, a lot of notes for this one, Joyce. So the nominees were Jack Nicholson for As Good as It Gets, Matt Damon for Good Will Hunting, Robert Duvall for The Apostle, Peter Fonda for Yuli's Gold, and Dustin Hoffman for Wag the Dog, where he's playing Robert Evans, basically. So it's like a big inside joke. And he ends up getting murdered at the end, I believe, by Robert De Niro. Or Robert De Niro orders his death at the very end of the movie. Jack Nicholson wins. A lot of this category was made up of, a lot of people being like, look at all these old guys and look at that kid, Matt Damon. What a charming kid.
I mean, to be fair, I think the other four all started acting or like already made movies before he was born. So.
Right. This is so I have notes. It is a pretty cool lineup because you have some of the greatest actors of all time all together, right? Mm-hmm. Like Jack and Peter Fonda in the same category is awesome.
Yeah, and then he like gives a shout out my old like pal Fonda.
And he like Robert Duvall, obviously, and Jack, awesome. Dustin Hoffman and Jack, great. Like this is an all-time category. And then Matt Damon for Good Will Hunting, who is awesome in the movie and totally deserving of a nomination. If I was doing it again, like I said, I don't know if I would give Jack the win. As Good as It Gets, not a movie I've watched very much in the last 25 years. I remember thinking it was completely fine. I can't imagine it has aged well because you have Jack playing like Archie Bunker, and it's just like full of offensive comments on women and the LGBTQ community and certainly minorities in general. And it's just not what you want. I haven't seen it, so I'm just assuming based on my memory of what the jokes were, where it's a lot of Jack being like, how do I write a woman? I take away all reason and accountability, but I'm bum.
Yeah, I mean it's like this like misanthrope, you know, like homophobe, like misogynist, but then he gets redeemed at the end.
Right. It's a whole movie about how like, Jack. We have a gay character played by Greg Kinnear and a Helen Hunt, obviously, and Cuba Gooding, and they're going to redeem this irredeemable misanthrope.
And there's a dog.
There's a dog that he throws down a laundry chute. I remember, it's funny, like this movie I think would get just killed 500 different ways if it was now. But,
totally. Like I again, I don't remember the last time I saw this movie, probably in the 90s. But it's fine. Like I think I enjoyed it when I watched it. Like there's a lot of movies you just enjoy when you're in the moment, but it's like forgettable or like it's problematic. You know that. Right.
This is like, this is James L. Brooks. I would say Judd Apatow gets compared to James L. Brooks a lot, or would like to be compared to James L. Brooks. And I don't think that Judd Apatow has made any movies as good as Broadcast News in terms of endearment, but this is like a Judd Apatow movie. I feel like As Good as It Gets. Like it is like this is 40 basically. And to me,
it's just, I don't know if it's also kind of like, I recall just kind of sitcom-y, and I don't mean it in a bad way, but that was just kind of the vibe. And obviously on a long running sitcom, you get to spend more time with those characters, but this is just like a 2-hour in and out. And it doesn't really feel like it's getting at anything. Like it's enjoyable. And so like they're both he and Helen, who won the last movie to win both lead categories, like they're good, like charming.
So I was looking at this and trying to think of and one last thing about the movie being problematic or whatever, which I don't even love doing, but I just feel like this is not very much age well. But I would say like at the time even, and I think they mentioned on the show maybe, but like the age difference between him and her is so ridiculous, and that is like completely farcical. And I think nowadays would be like immediately called out, but it was even called out then. I mean, people were like, "This is not like you got old Jack Nicholson and young Helen Hunt like in a romantic relationship." It is just hard to
I
buy.
think the character was written older.
Yeah.
And then they just cast Helen because they just liked her.
So yeah, Jack wins. I mean, like Jack Nicholson winning a third Oscar, not going to be unhappy with, but
yeah, like he feels like someone who should have 3 Oscars. Should he have won his third one for this?
So that was what I was thinking. Like if he doesn't win this, I think he probably would win for About Schmidt. Maybe would you say that's fair?
I mean, he was definitely a favorite going in that night. Probably, yeah, because that's only 5 years later.
And it's like there was really no need to give him one for About Schmidt. And About Schmidt is the more mature version of like As Good as It Gets, maybe, right? Or the more indie version. I also think if he doesn't win here, maybe he's nominated for The Departed. I know that's like become a controversial performance, but he's awesome in The Departed. I do no problem saying that. And it's like he should have got.
So many people here end up in The Departed from this.
So many. It's like the whole thing.
I know Alec Baldwin is there. So
yeah, it's like I don't mind that Jack won. I just think like based on these, I think Peter Fonda should have won.
I would probably vote for Peter. Yeah, and also Jack hasn't been nominated since About Schmidt. That was his last nomination. Yeah, it kind of felt like they were. So the thing with his performance in this movie, again, he's good, but it just feels like he's, playing himself.
Right. It's like Jack.
Like it's just like I mean, obviously he's acting.
Right.
But the character, like he leans into his persona a lot, like just the Jack Nicholson persona that people love. Minus
the problematic language, but yes. I agree with you. Yeah, no, it's like he is playing Jack, like a cantankerous Archie Bunker version of Jack. So I understand why he won. It's great. He gets his Oscar from Frances McDormand, who's so psyched to be there.
He like skips to the stage. Yeah,
so great. It's a great moment. His speech is legitimately good. He's like he gives a shout out to all the nominees. Basically, he goes like our rest in peace for a bunch of people who died, including J.T. Walsh, which I loved because he was obviously such a big part of A Few Good Men, Joyce, which I know we're fans of. Yeah, I would put Leo in, and I think I would knock out Dustin Hoffman if I was doing it. I mean, I get why Dustin Hoffman was nominated because again, he's playing like Robert Evans, and it's like kind of like a gag. But Leo in Titanic is legitimately good, and I think he's as good as Matt Damon in Good Will Hunting. And I know they were kind of like pitted against each other, and Matt Damon was seen as more of like the actorly type because his movie was more of an indie and stuff. But yeah, I think Leo should have gotten in here.
Yeah, he got the Globe nomination, and yeah, I mean, if Leo had gotten, I was not upset that he wasn't nominated like a lot of teen girls were. There's a whole section in Inside Oscar about the reactions of his teenage fans. Yeah, I think he's good in Titanic, and obviously like a huge star-making performance. This just reminded me of, do you recall the completely insane discourse from 2 years ago when people were trying to determine when Leonardo DiCaprio got famous? Like, was it with Titanic or not? But anyway, you totally get why he wasn't nominated, because again, they don't normally nominate romantic leads or young guys. So like, yes, he and Matt are 4 years apart. So like they're both young. Leo's younger. But again, like you said, like Matt, like the movie is seen more serious and it's not a romance. And like, sure, he has a romance in the movie, but it's not seen as this romance drama. And Leo was like the huge star and like conventionally attractive, and they just don't normally go for those types of actors.
Right.
Yeah. And then he didn't go to the show. So.
The other person I wrote down, and again, I wrote down 2 other people. You'll be surprised to know which movies they're from. From Boogie Nights, Mark Wahlberg. I don't think he would have gotten nominated, but it is a great performance. He's really quite good in it, and I think he plays that naivete really well. But I have no doubt, I know why he wasn't nominated for a million reasons, but also like if you think of like Goodfellas, the Ray Liotta part is not the part that gets nominated, right? It's the flashier supporting parts and like Mark
And
Wahlberg.
like
over
Mark
Leona.
in Boogie Nights also reminds me of him in The Fighter, where like again he's like overshadowed by the supporting performances because you have Julianne Moore,
Yep.
you know, and Burt Reynolds, obviously.
And the other one I wrote down was Samuel L. Jackson for Jackie Brown. I guess you could say maybe it's supporting, but I don't know. I think he could have gotten nominated here. He's so good. It's like an iconic character, Ordell Robbie. He really brings it. I just think it's like a great performance.
Who of the LA Confidential guys would you have nominated? Because there's 3 of them.
So I'd argue maybe they're all supporting. There are 3 leads.
You would push them all supporting.
I think if I was going to put a lead,
You would
I
do
would
a
say,
spotlight.
if I was going to say lead, it would be Guy Pearce. To me, he's like the lead of the movie because he's the entry point of the movie as like a character.
And also the exit.
And he's good. He's really quite good in it. But I don't think he would get nominated.
No, and I think like Russell has like the flashier part.
I think
like, Guy is more like by the book.
We'll get there, and I think he should get nominated too. But
I mean, this is the start of Russell Crowe's ascendancy.
Yeah.
So he's gonna have the Insider in 2 years, so which I love.
Great. So best actress, we mentioned Helen Hunt wins for As Good as It Gets. She gives a very charming speech, like we said, shouting out the nominees. Great lineup, I'd say. Helena Bonham Carter for Wings of the Dove, Julie Christie for Afterglow, Judi Dench for Mrs. Brown, and Kate Winslet for Titanic. The only person I wrote down, I think, was, well, I wrote down 2 people. Pam Grier for Jackie Brown. I would have loved to have in. It's hard to say who you'd knock out. I guess, like, I'd have to kick out Julie Christie or Helena Bonham Carter, but those are both really good performances. So, and then the other person I wrote down was Julia Roberts for My Best Friend's Wedding. She's amazing in it. It's an amazing movie.
Yeah. She got the comeback. You know, the comedy musical Globe lineup or actress was pretty good because it was Helen who won, Julia, J-Lo for Selena back when they were still nominating just anything with music, musical or comedy. Pam Grier and Joey Lauren Adams for Chasing Amy.
I have Chasing Amy down for something else later. I love Joey Lauren Adams in Chasing Amy. She's really, really quite good in it. The movie, I think the movie's not aged that poorly, honestly. I've watched it again within the last couple of years. It's like kind of immature, but it's not like, you know, shoot it into space bad, I would say. I mean, who would you have won here if Helen Hunt had not won? Again, it's a movie like this feels to me like people were really enthusiastic about Helen Hunt. It kind of snowballed and she just ended up winning. That kind of
also
thing.
Like Mad About You, it's, you know, I think she had already won 2 Emmys by that point. So it was funny because obviously she was nominated at the SAGs and the Globes also for Mad About You, but she lost those and won, you know, for As Good as It Gets, you know.
Right.
It's like they took her over there. Also, she's the only American in this lineup.
Right.
And
so she mentions how
maybe that was her advantage. So
I mean, I think it's definitely, well, if you look, I mean, outside of Titanic, it's the biggest movie, right, of the other 3. Titanic, I don't think Kate Winslet was a serious contender here to win. I think it was nice that she was nominated, obviously.
No, yeah.
And so the other 3, and then are just not as widely seen and not American actresses. So you end up like Helen Hunt. I understand why she won. I do.
I probably would have voted for Judi Dench in Mrs. Brown. That was actually on TV a couple weeks ago and I watched the first 30 minutes of it, and like Billy Connolly is also great in it. I would have nominated him, although I don't know if I've done him in lead or supporting because he was also borderline. And this was really her breakthrough, like her major breakthrough, like especially in America, and she was already 63, and then obviously she would win the next year for Shakespeare in Love for like 8 minutes, and that was like a makeup Oscar.
It does feel like a makeup Oscar, and I wonder if she would have won here. And it sounded like literally like even Helen Hunt was like, I think Judi Dench should have won.
Yeah. She told Hank Azaria.
He told her beloved Hank Azaria, she says that she's going to win the Oscar. And good luck though, she didn't win. But I would say like, I wonder if she wins here, does she win the next year for Shakespeare in Love? Probably not. I think it's always interesting.
Probably not. Yeah.
But I mean, you know, this is not the strongest actress year, like we said. Like, there's not like a lot of other people I could think of who were missed. I mean, did you have anybody else?
No, not really. Yeah.
And I like
Helen
Hunt
so much. This is a good lineup of like good performances.
I do like Helen Hunt so much. So it's not like, it's not an egregious win by any means. I just don't, the movie's just not as memorable, I think, compared to these other movies.
Yeah. And I am glad she eventually got a second nomination for the Sessions. So she returned, because I think a lot of people kind of felt like her film career, I guess, like didn't take off after this or whatever. But I don't know. I think it's like you shouldn't judge like their career based on their Oscar win, because the Oscar is ideally supposed to be for that performance, right? And you don't know what's
Yeah.
going to happen after that. So
I mean, she
I mean,
doesn't like,
you would hope it helps their careers and whatnot, but that's also not always the case.
I mean, she follows up As Good as It Gets. In 2000, she's in 4 different movies.
What Women Want.
What Women Want, which is a humongous hit, obviously.
I saw that in the theater.
Castaway, which is a humongous hit.
I also saw it in the theater.
Pay It Forward, which is a tremendous flop and pretty bad. And then Dr. T and the Women, which is Robert Altman. So it's like she follows up with like 4 legit movies there. I mean, Pay It Forward was maybe not great, but obviously it's like, you know, Kevin Spacey off and on, like, you know, off American Beauty and stuff. And there's like an idea where this is going to be good. Haley Joel Osment off of Sixth Sense. Then she's in a Woody Allen movie in 2001. And then not much since, right? Like 2000, I'm looking at her 2004 movie called A Good Woman. 2006, Bobby. Remember Bobby?
I remember Bobby because that was by Emilio Estevez. So
she does Then She Found Me, Everyday Soul Surfer, and Jock the Hero Dog is a voice role. And then The Sessions, which you mentioned, and not much else. I mean, like, there's not a lot of.
Well, in the past decade, she's turned to directing.
Yes. So that's partially the reason why. But it's like,
yeah,
it is nice that I think it's a good win. I don't think it's a bad win, I guess.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I think it's also because I think at this point, there's still kind of a TV stigma.
Yes.
You know, so it is kind of cool that she's on this huge show. I think that's another part why she won, because people were familiar with her from Mad About You.
Right.
And so it's cool that she's like simultaneously on this huge successful sitcom, and she wins an Oscar, you know, in her spare time.
Right. Supporting actor, Joyce. This is a killer lineup, and I could come up with another like 10 or 12 people we could put in it. But Robin Williams obviously wins for Good Will Hunting. The other nominees were Robert Forster for Jackie Brown, which we are on record as being supportive of. Great nomination. Anthony Hopkins for Amistad as John Quincy Adams. Greg Kinnear in As Good as It Gets, and Burt Reynolds as Jack Horner in Boogie Nights. So Burt Reynolds famously kind of, the rumor was that he was just unhappy with Boogie Nights and like fired his agent and was like, I can't believe you'll put me in this smut. And then he had like a 180 when he realized people love the movie and stuff. I don't know. I think that might be a little bit apocryphal. I don't know how true that is based on like, even at the time, it didn't seem that true. But I will say he definitely looked pissed off that he lost when they show like Robin Williams winning. It didn't seem like a total surprise that Robin Williams would have won this award based on like what else won in that year. Where like,
well, Burt won the Globe.
He won the Globe, but like,
but Robin won SAG. SAG right. In its 4th year now. So
when he wins, Burt does like a eye roll kind of like clap thing. He's just not happy. He's not happy with this at all. I don't think I would give it to Burt again if we were revoting. I think Robin Williams is like truly remarkably good in Good Will Hunting. It's a great performance. It's so funny and so heartwarming, I think, and like just quite good. But yeah, Burt was not happy. I'd say the other people I wrote down, well, Russell Crowe, I think, would be the person from LA Confidential to put here. I think you can make the case for Kevin Spacey. I know he's canceled now in hindsight, obviously, but like the performance is quite good. It just doesn't feel like any different from like, he's just like kind of like not sleepwalking, but it just seems like effortless to him to do that kind of player. But yeah. Russell Crowe is so good. I wrote down Don Cheadle for Boogie Nights because I think he's like really, really good in Boogie Nights. Kevin Kline in The Ice Storm, I wrote down. Robert De Niro for Jackie Brown, I think is great. Just like a kind of against type De Niro where he's like a stoner dummy. Don't really see that very often. And then my personal favorite choice, which would never get nominated, Al Pacino as John Milton in The Devil's Advocate. Just an all-time Pacino.
You and The Devil's Advocate. Wow.
Great movie. All-time movie. Great watch. Al Pacino.
My pick for someone who would never be nominated here is Rupert Everett.
So he should have been nominated, probably. I mean, there was like talk of him getting nominated for My Best Friend's Wedding. Would have been fun.
It's never happening.
I think that the weaker nominees here are Anthony Hopkins for Amistad. I don't think would not one of his.
Who did not attend.
Did not attend. And I think Greg Kinnear, you know, God bless him. I really like Greg Kinnear as a performer. I think it was caught up in the as good as it gets enthusiasm.
A coattail, yeah.
Yeah. So,
yeah, and it was also Robin Williams' time.
Yeah.
And yeah, like you said, it's a great role for him. And I forget who it was who were like advising Matt and Ben on the script, but obviously I'm sure you've read all the oral histories on this, as have I. There was like an NSA subplot and like other stuff in early drafts, and you know, obviously they talked to Kevin Smith and like Rob Reiner, and some other people, and I forget who it was, but they were like acts like the NSA thing, and then like focus more on like his Will's relationship with Sean.
Yeah.
And like beef it up. And you really see that in the movie, like, you know, a lot of talking, a lot of speeches, and Robin, you know, his clip is like the bench scene, obviously. So he has a lot of moving speeches, and then he gets to be as close to the comic manic Robin when he's describing Game 6.
Yes.
That he did not attend because he had to go see about a girl, his future wife.
So great.
Yeah.
It's a great performance. I don't know if this, I mean, I have like such I don't know. I'm like so in the tank for Good Will Hunting. I have not really followed the discourse. I don't know if this win has aged well or poorly. Do people think like he shouldn't have won?
I think most people love the win, if not for the movie, but just for him, because they love Robin Williams, especially after he died.
Yeah.
You know?
It's a nice moment. His speech is really nice. And then obviously they do a lot of cutting to Billy Crystal, which I found like a little weird because it's like, I know they're friends, but like, it's like Robin Williams' moment. It's nice though. They do hug at the end. So that's cute.
Yeah. And it's also cute when he notices Billy after he's like about to walk off the stage, and then he sees him, and then he lets out a little yelp and hugs him, and it's cute.
Yeah, really nice.
But yeah, I think it was just his time. And also, you know, he was just the more popular actor at that time. He also had Flubber this year.
Oh yeah, of course. Well, I mean, like it's not a similar comp, but I think Burt Reynolds has a little bit of Sylvester Stallone on him at times.
Yes,
you know?
And we all know his history with Sally Field.
Right. So I don't think he was most beloved, you know, actor.
Would you say he's similar to Lauren Bacall?
Well, I don't know though, because I think Lauren Bacall maybe wasn't beloved because of sexism, and I think Burt Reynolds wasn't maybe beloved because he just was like a little mean on the way up. Perhaps I don't know, right? Yeah. I mean, that's like the sense I would get. Supporting actress, Joyce. Gil Cates is going to be so pissed at us because this is really going long. So we'll move into supporting actors. Kim Basinger wins for LA Confidential. It's I think the first award of the night. Joan Cusack, Minnie Driver, Julianne Moore, and Gloria Stewart for Titanic. Now, having watched all of these movies recently, and I love Kim Basinger, and I was really excited for her to win. Julianne Moore probably should have won for Boogie Nights. And I would say Minnie Driver is a close second in Good Will Hunting. She is remarkably good in Good Will Hunting. It is a great performance. She's so charming, so funny. She breaks your heart. It's like really great. I just love her in the movie. And Kim Basinger, I think, is quite good in LA Confidential, but there's not really any kind of major scenes that you could hang your hat on with her in the movie. She's like...
No, I think a lot of the affection for her performance is just the character itself, like, you know, Veronica like look-alike, and then just everything, like it's like it feels more like atmospheric, and she's good in it. And remember, like this past year with like Nightmare Alley, everyone was like, oh, Cate Blanchett could be like Kim Basinger,
right?
It's like the femme fatale, you know. But I think even like Kate does more in Nightmare Alley than Kim does here.
Yeah, she's like, it's a very fine, like it's not a bad performance, and
it's
like
in the scene stealing performance, and those do well, obviously, in supporting.
And I get why she won, like all those things. I mean, Julianne Moore in Boogie Nights is amazing. I think she's just so good. And yeah, like I said, Minnie Driver is awesome. The other people,
I mean, in that time period between Julianne Moore's like double noms for The Hours and Far From Heaven, and then when she finally won for Still Alice, you know, when we were all like, will she ever get nominated again? Will she ever win? It was like, I would have given it to her for Boogie Nights. And
I think she should have gotten it for Boogie Nights. I think that would have that would have been fine. I don't think that would have been I think that win would have aged incredibly well. The other people I wrote down, Joyce, Bridget Fonda for Jackie Brown. Love her and Jackie Brown. It's a great performance, and it would have been fun to have a Bridget Fonda, Peter Fonda nomination. Sigourney Weaver for the Ice Storm. There was like a lot of buzz around her performance, and like
she won the BAFTA, which was a month later.
So I think she could have gotten in.
Yeah.
But the movie just again didn't really go anywhere. And I wrote down Cameron Diaz for My Best Friend's Wedding. I think again, Rupert Everett, like similarly, was not going to ever happen. But she's great in My Best Friend's Wedding. It's a good performance.
I don't know when should we like do like a section on just Cameron Diaz alone? Maybe like because and it sucks now because like she was never nominated. You know, she was great in Being John Malkovich in 2 years, and
well, she was great. We could do it next year. My There's Something About Mary is 98.
Yeah,
and I think she should have gotten nominated for sure for that. I think.
I mean, I don't think she was going to nominate just because it was a comedy, but like, you know, she was like getting like critics awards for like Being John Malkovich. And like she hit precursors for those, and it kind of felt like people, you know, maybe there was like a bias, you know, of like for this like model like turned actress who was like trying to go serious, and maybe they thought like there's more time in the future, and then she's retired now. Like there's no time. So
who else did you think of for this one? Anybody else?
Yeah, Sigourney Weaver would have been good. I don't know who else was there. Did I write down anyone else? No, I don't think so. Sigourney, I think Sigourney also got the Globe nomination. And then so this, like we said before, if like Gloria Stewart had won this, then Titanic could have beaten the record and gotten the most wins.
So when Kim Basinger won, Minnie Driver seems actually like not mad surprised like Burt Reynolds. She was like,
wow. Yeah.
She was like, wow. Like she was surprised that she won, because I think people really did think that the enthusiasm for Gloria Stewart or Titanic was going to like come through. But I think I mentioned this last week. I think there is the concept that the Oscars are very sentimental and like will always go for like the older performer. And that was part of the reason why people thought Lauren Bacall was going to win. And then it was like, no. And this kind of feels similarly. I don't think Gloria Stewart should have won. It's a fine performance, but I mean, like, no, no offense to Gloria Stewart or family or anybody. It's a fine performance. But I think like if it was a more sentimental Academy, that she would have won. But it's not as sentimental, and like she's not going to win. So
yeah, well, also, so she and Kim tied at SAG. So I think that's also why people thought she had a stronger chance than she probably ended up having. But it just was kind of clear that, you know, the things carrying Titanic is not like the acting, or even though like great performances, like Kathy Bates, Victor Garber, I'm in, like Billy Zane. So great performances, but it's not what you would single out as like the best of the film, or even like, you know, of the year, you know. So I'm not surprised that she lost. And I think going in, I didn't really expect her to win either.
No, it was not a surprise that Kim Basinger won. I remember at the time. It was like, felt like it was going to happen. And then Joyce, so Gil Cates is still in my ear here. We got to go to Screenplay. No notes on these wins, but Good Will Hunting obviously wins for Matt and Ben. A great moment. They're so psyched. Jack Lemmon is thrilled that they won.
He was so excited to read their names.
The other nominees are As Good as It Gets, Boogie Nights, Deconstructing Harry, Woody Allen, and The Full Monty, Simon Beaufoy. I think the movies I wrote down as possibilities that would never get nominated, but I think Austin Powers, My Best Friend's Wedding, and Chasing Amy were three I wrote down.
I would nominate Chasing Amy, especially then, over, I guess I would drop Deconstructing Harry.
I will drop Deconstructing Harry, and obviously Woody Allen is like toxic now for
well, also he doesn't need another nomination.
He doesn't need another nomination. That movie was fine. I think it was like one of his later 90s like ones that people enjoyed. Maybe not as much more cynical than the previous years, which I think was Everyone Says I Love You, which is more of a musical. But yeah, Matt and Ben for Good Will Hunting. As much as I
And
love
also
Boogie Nights,
I also just want to say, like,
would not change it.
the order of presentation for this ceremony, it's on Wikipedia, so you could go look at it. But they did Best Actress like midway through, which they also happened again like 10 years later, again when Julie Christie was nominated and like Marion Cotillard won. It was like halfway through, and then they did Best Actor, and then they still had a couple of craft categories, like including cinematography, to do after that. And they did both screenplay awards after Best Actor. And I remember this too when I was watching it back then, because it felt like to me that they were really banking on like the Matt and Ben moment, because that was like such a big part of the season.
Yes.
Like, you know, best friends from Boston wrote this movie and they're going to Oscars, and like they're the favorites to win, and they were like saving them for the end. And now, you know, if Steven Soderbergh had produced the show, original screenplay would have been last. So
maybe they would have lost. And then LA Confidential for adapted screenplay, no notes there as well. Just a great, we talked about it. This screenplay is amazing. Yeah. And again, this was like, we've kind of talked about this in previous things, but like the screenplay Oscars go to like the movies that people
they're
love.
the consolation prizes.
And like, you knew that Good Will Hunting and LA Confidential were the consolation prize of Titanic, and so they won these Oscars.
So as we said, Titanic not nominated for screenplay, and also screenplay, the weakest aspect of that movie.
Yeah, it's not something that people really remember. Though there are a lot of memorable lines, I would say, including King of the World.
But not a great script. But if it were to get nominated in original, I guess the obvious thing would be to drop Woody Allen. It will take that place, but it still wouldn't win. But it would just have that nomination.
So those are the major categories. We really should wrap up because this is so long. But I wanted to touch on score. This is another one where 2 score categories exist. Original dramatic score, Titanic wins. I take issue with this one. I would say the James Horner score is more memorable in My Heart Will Go On, and that should win there, which it did, obviously. And this original score should have gone to either LA Confidential or Good Will Hunting. Perhaps LA Confidential for Jerry Goldsmith. That's my hot take.
Yeah, I really like the LA Confidential score, but I think it's just like that motif is like obviously in My Heart Will Go On, and they're just so interconnected,
right,
that you just can't. So I mean, obviously we all knew he was winning both, so yes. Yeah. Also, I was very sad when he died, because he died in a plane crash like 6 years ago.
Yep. Very upsetting.
But I think it's so, that score is also so instantly recognizable, and it's one of those rare scores now when you just hear the first 2 notes and you know, like, that's the movie. And I don't know.
You know, like, the song. I don't know. Do you know this? I mean, you know, My Heart Will Go On, I guess.
Yeah. Well, you know both, I think.
Yeah.
I think the score is like equally, but everyone also saw this movie, so I think you know that.
I know. I'm just saying.
Yeah. I really like the song category, because all 5 of these are all bangers all the time. CeCe Kendall Roy, because it's My Heart Will Go On, obviously. Go the Distance from Hercules. Journey to the Past from Anastasia, which everyone thinks is a Disney movie, but it's not. It's Fox, but now technically it's owned by Disney.
Back around. It's come back around.
Irony. How Do I Live from Con Air, another Diane Warren banger.
Really good song.
Yeah, and Miss Misery, which I would have voted for from Good Will Hunting, even though it's an end credit song.
It's a great song, and really beautiful song. Yeah, no notes in that category.
All of these performances are also on YouTube if you want to go watch them. So yeah, also very sad this category, because obviously Elliott Smith has also died, and Aaliyah, who sang Journey to the Past, is also gone.
A lot of death at this one. Pretty sad, but I mean, I got nothing else. This was a great Oscars.
The cinematography.
Cinematography. Love Titanic cinematography. It won. Russell Carpenter. The nominees were Janis Kaminski for Amistad, Roger Deakins for Kundun. Marty, I liked it.
That was Marty's entry this year.
I saw that in the theater too, and we were like, "Oh boy, that was not our speed not our Marty speed at the time."
You didn't want a Dalai Lama drama?
No, we sat through it though. LA Confidential, Dante Spinotti, and The Wings of the Dove, Eduardo Serra. those are the nominees there.
And Janusz for Amistad.
And Amistad, yeah.
Yeah.
Titanic winning here is fine. LA Confidential again, I think is just remarkable. But Titanic, great cinematography. Joyce, anything else? Should we do a moment of silence for the ceremony before we sign off?
Yeah, we should have time James Cameron so we can match it, but it went on. It was interminable. It felt like just like this episode.
So we'll be back with more Oscars Playback next week. I don't even know what we're gonna do, Joyce. We'll have to stay tuned to figure it out.
I know we're gonna run out of 90s soon.
And we can go back in time, maybe. We'll see.
It's true.
All right. Bye.